Welcome to Module 8. Today we are going to be drafting the skirt and the sleeve that will match up with the bodice front and bodice back that we drafted last week. So, a couple things I have uploaded on Canvas, a measurement sheet again for you to help take your own measurements. Note that the measurements for the sleeve are on a different page than the bodice, than all the rest of the measurements. So if you're one of those individuals who's just drafting everything based on the measurements in the book, you're going to have to go to a different page for those measurements, and it's listed on the sheet that I give you. When you are taking measurements for the sleeve, ones that are missing in the book are the elbow depth. So if you're taking measurements for yourself, it's from the point that you've measured here at your shoulder, when you were taking all the measurements on the front and on the back. That same point, you're going to go down and just measure over from here down to the level of the elbow. And then if you're taking the full measurement, you're going to be going from the shoulder, and you're going all the way down, and you're going to measure to that point on the wrist. Another quick note, in the book they don't have the hand measurement, so if you're drafting this for yourself, when it says hand on the sheet of paper that I've uploaded to Canvas, that means you're going to be measuring around your hand at the widest point. So you're going to need that for the sleeve. If you're using the book, I'll give instructions as I draft if you're just going to use the book, because the book doesn't have that measurement for the hand. Other things that I wanted to mention before I bring you down and kind of go with you. Oh, you do want to have access to the patterns, your bodice front and bodice back, from last week, because there's a couple things you just kind of want to check with it. I guess you don't have to have them. You can just use some of the measurements from last week to make sure. No, you need access to it. I take that back. You need access to your front and your back pattern from last week, because we have to make sure the sleeve is going to fit into it. Other than that, let me bring you down and we'll get started. I'm going to start with the sleeve, finish up the top portion of the body, and then we're going to move down and do the skirt that will get sewn on to the top. Okay? So we're going to start with the sleeve. I have my measurements here. And remember, I'm doing all of this on the half, so if I say numbers or anything, don't pay attention to numbers unless I really tell you to pay attention to a number, because there's a lot of these numbers that I'm dividing in half. A lot of these numbers, whatever number I choose to use, will be completely different from you, because you're going to be taking these measurements for yourself. Anyhow, so if there's a number that really matters, I will tell you. If not, go according to the measurements on your chart. So to begin with the sleeve, you need to, I'm going to be developing a sleeve with you that has a 4-inch sleeve cap. And that's just sort of a nice middle of the road sleeve cap height. So on your paper, make sure that you start out at least 5 inches down from the top of your piece of paper, just so that you have room to be able to develop everything. So go ahead and give yourself a nice horizontal line at least 5 inches down from the top of whatever paper you're building on. And then from that line, we're going to square another line. So use a nice big square for this. And just make a really big cross, just like that. This is your bicep level. This first horizontal line that you did, that is the bicep. This other line is the center of your sleeve. Okay? So now we're going to start building it. On the right side of the paper, that is towards the front. And on the left side of your paper, that is towards the back of your arm. So this is for a sleeve for the right side of the body. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in and indicate our sleeve cap height. So we want a 4-inch sleeve cap. So from the bicep level, you're going to go up 4 inches and make a mark. That is the cap of your sleeve. And then from this new sleeve cap level, you are going to measure from there down along the long line your sleeve length. And when you get to the bottom of your new sleeve length, you're going to make a mark. So we've got the top of the cap of the sleeve up here, and at the bottom, this is down by your wrist. And we're going to square over at the bottom, both directions. If you're doing this full size, make sure you use a big square to make sure that this is as accurate as possible. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure the bicep. So whatever bicep measurement you have, you're going to center that on the center of this, on this line that's down the middle. So if, for example, your bicep is 12 inches, I'm going to have 6 inches of it on this side and 6 inches of it on the other side. So use this to create the middle point of that bicep measurement. So I'm centering it. And that is one side of your underarm. Here's the underside of your other underarm. Okay. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to start developing the sleeve cap. And we're going to take this underarm and draw a nice line perfectly diagonal up to the cap. Just like that, on both sides, on the front and on the back. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find the middle of that. You're just going to make a quick mark at the middle. On the front and on the back. Okay? So now, where the middle line is and where the bicep line intersects, so this point right here, you're going to take a line from there through the middle of that diagonal that we've just created, and you're going to draw a line along there. And you're going to do that on the other side as well. Just like that. On the front, from this point where it intersects, you're going to go out, and you're going to continue going out an additional 1/8 of an inch. And you're going to make a nice little mark 1/8 of an inch beyond. And on the back, you're going to go out 1/4 of an inch. This is going to help us make the front and the back different. Let me zoom in so you can see that. So the mark that I've created extends here by 1/8 of an inch on the front. So this is the front of my sleeve, so to the right side of the paper, and on the back it's going out 1/4 of an inch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to square out a little bit right here at the top of the sleeve cap. And this is just so that when I start drawing my curves, it matches up easier. It doesn't go too high up when I'm doing it. So I'm going to grab my French curve, and on the front I'm going to make sure that at least for 1/2 an inch on the front and 1/2 an inch on the back, it will remain flat so that when it gets to the top of the sleeve it remains perfectly flat. So I'm going to take my French curve and blend from the top, and I'm going to just come and extend just a little bit beyond this midway point. Don't let it get too pointy like this so that it's like perfectly flat at the top and then comes down, or too far over like that so that it's actually coming down too soon. Make sure that it comfortably does something like that. And then you're going to rotate your French curve, and you're going to do the same thing coming from the underarm, but you need to make sure that it blends smoothly with the curve that's coming down from the cap. Like that. And then we're going to do the same thing for the back. This curve will be a little bit flatter because we've extended the point out at the middle 1/4 of an inch. It will help for the shape of the back of the human form. Did a double line there on accident. Like that, and then I'm going to turn my ruler over. I'm going to do the same thing for the underarm curve. Like that. And there I have my sleeve cap developed. Okay. Now what I can do is I can approach the bottom of the sleeve. And what we're going to do is take that measurement that you took from around your hand, and we're going to apply it down here at the wrist. If you don't have a hand measurement, what you're going to do is you will take your bicep measurement and just subtract 3 inches. It's kind of a shot in the dark number, but it is a good start for getting it ready for just doing a fitting session. So it'll give us a nice spot to start with. I'm just going to take that measurement and center it, and half of it's going out the front, half of it's going out the back. Just like that. And then I'm going to connect that point Actually, I'm not going to connect it all the way, and you'll see why in just a second. I'm just going to square it a little bit down, just like that. Just enough for me to extend that underarm line. I'm squaring over from this new line that I've started drawing. I've extended it over, and it's going to start coming down a little bit. Now, that is important because now I am going to make sure that this sleeve works with my bodice front and my bodice back. So you're going to need to grab your bodice front and your bodice back, and you're going to measure from the armhole opening from here to here. Make sure you don't include any of your seam allowance. So when I measure mine, the full size measurement is 4 1/4. Is 8 1/4 inches. So make note of that measurement. And then on the, let me mark it down here. And then on the front, my full size measurement is 8. Half size, it's a 4, but don't go by my numbers because yours will be different. I'm going to take those two numbers and add them together. So, for example, at this half size, my back measurement was 4 1/8. My front measurement was 4. When I add those together, I end up with 8 1/8 of an inch, which means that when I measure my sleeve from here up over the cap down to this other side, this cap measurement needs to be at least 8 1/8 of an inch, if not just a little bit more. So if it's less than that, I need to do some alterations. So I'm just going to measure over the top. And mine is 7 3/4 of an inch, which means it's too small. And that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that number and find the difference between 7 3/4 of an inch and 8 1/8 of an inch. Which is 3/8 of an inch, which means that I need to, in order to get this sleeve cap to be the correct size, I need to add at least 3/8 of an inch to the distance here. And I'm going to do that right here at the underarm. I'm going to take that difference number, which happens to be 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to divide it in 2. So I would need to add 3/16 of an inch to the front and 3/16 to the back. Personally, I like my sleeve cap to be a little bit bigger, so I'm actually just going to make it a full 1/4 of an inch here and a full 1/4 of an inch here. Whoops, let me just back that off. So that measurement is taken along that new line that was coming down here. That I squared away. So I'm going to take this new mark that I've created here and here. So these new marks, that will be the new underarm point. It increases the size of my bicep just a smidge. That is okay. I did forget to mention on the bicep, you need to make sure that you're adding ease. So add 2 inches of ease to that bicep measurement. It's listed on the paper, so that should be fine. You should be able to remember it because it is listed on that measurement for the bicep. Cool. So now what we're going to do is if you have an elbow measurement, you're going to go from the top of the sleeve cap and measure down to the level of the elbow. If you don't have an elbow drop measurement, just take from the bicep line to the bottom, measure that, and divide it in 2. And that'll give you a good starting spot, and we can adjust where to put that elbow during the fitting. So there's the elbow line. Other thing to do, I've adjusted everything to make sure that my sleeve cap now fits. I'm going to get rid of all of these extra lines. I can add my seam allowance. And then the other thing I also need to add is a notch. So I'm going to come up from this bicep line here, this point here, and from this point here, I'm going to come up along that curve and create my notches. On the front, I'm going to come up 3 inches, go along that line 3 inches, and add a single notch. On the back, I'm also going to do 3 inches but I'm going to add a double notch. And then, while I'm still thinking about notches, I'm going to make corresponding notches on the front armhole and on the back armhole that match my sleeve. Once that's finished, I can add seam allowance everywhere, and the sleeve is finished. The other thing actually I do need to make sure I do is indicate where the notch is at the top as well. So I'm going to come along from the back and indicate where that top notch goes for your shoulder seam. So remember your shoulder seam notch too. I'm going to finish that off camera, and there we go. So I say that's the sleeve, but this is just one of many. As you know, there's the different cap heights, but there's also the elbow dart. So if you start out with this sleeve, if we want to add an elbow dart here at the back, this is when you could add it. I'm not going to require that for the assignment, but if you want to be developing all of that out, simply find the midway point on the back half of the sleeve at the elbow. That is your elbow point. So to get the elbow in there, all we have to do is slash from the back up to, but not through, the seam line at the front. So there we have the sleeve, and it's being pivoted a little bit. So then just grab some other paper to fill it in. And I am taping down the top portion. And I want this elbow dart to be 1/2 inch in size. Once I've marked that, I can close this down. And finish taping everything together. The elbow dart, so this top spot right there is where I want the dart pointing to. So I'm going to connect that like that, and that creates the elbow dart. So now I can go in and perfect this dart, and it will be complete. Alright, so now we're going to do the skirts. We developed the skirt, the front and the skirt back at the same time. So what we're going to do is get yourself your big piece of paper, and you're going to develop it. We're going to begin with the hip line. So pretend I have a lot of paper coming towards me this direction. So this is down towards me. Up here is where all of the darts are going to be developed. My paper is not huge, so I'm not going to develop all the full possible length on skirts. But mostly all of the stuff that really needs to be developed is up by the waist and through the hip area. So here is my hip line. To make sure it's nice and long enough to include your entire half of your full hip measurement. Halfway through this, give yourself a line and just square up. and square down. If you were going to have full skirts that go all the way down to the knee, I would just extend this line and just continue it down and down and down. And the longer it goes, the longer the skirt. But to stay within the range of the camera, I'm gonna just say, hey look, it's been truncated. There's that little zigzag line saying, hey, this line's been, everything's been scrunched this direction. So from the first measurement we need going up from the hip, so you might want to label this line, this is your hip line, or it is also your HBL, which is your horizontal balance line. Okay, so from the hip, you're going to measure up your side hip depth. So that's the first measurement that I have listed for you. You're measuring up from the waist, not your waist, measuring up from that hip line up to the waist, and you're going to square that over to the back and to the front. And just like with the sleeve, the right side of my paper is the front, and the back is on the left side of the paper. It might be good for you to label that just so you don't get turned around. Once you've established that, you can also measure down from the horizontal balance line or the hip line. You can come this direction, actually down from the hip line, from the waistline up here. You can measure down from that new point, your waist to knee. So measure down and down and down and down and down and down and down until you reach your desired length of skirt. I'm just going to put a line here at the bottom of my paper indicating that that's where the knee is. Okay, so this is where the knee is. This has just all been shortened. The next information that you're going to need to use is your hip arc, front and back, and you're going to take those measurements and you're going to add ½ an inch to them right from the get-go. On the bodice front and bodice back, we added ease at the end. This time we're adding ease as we develop it. So along the hip line, going towards the front, we're going to take the front hip arc plus that ½ inch of ease and add it to the front. And from that line, you're going to square up and down. And this line is your center front line. This is your center front. Now, along the hip line, you're going to go towards the back. And you're going to take your back hip arc plus that ½ inch of ease. It's a ½ an inch for the front and a ½ an inch for the back, so you're actually adding a full inch on this whole half size. Half of the body, you're adding a full inch, not half size, sorry. And you're going to square up and down. And this is your center back. Now, what we're going to do is create some other lines that are important. So on that center front, right here where it intersects this waist line, you're going to come down from the waist along center front, and you're going to come down a full ½ an inch. And just square over a little bit. On the back, you're going to come down a ¼ of an inch. So here's my center back line. Here's my center back line. Here's my hip line. Here's the waist. So you might want to label waist just in case that gets confusing to you. And you're going to come down along center back for 1/4 of an inch. The next thing that we're going to do is from the side seam, so this first line that we created right down the middle of our paper, that is your side seam. At the waist, you're going to come over 1 inch towards the back and 1 inch towards the front. And you're going to take your hip curve or some other really long curve and you're going to blend it down to the hip. And you want it to be the same curve. Whatever you do on the front, you want it to be on the back. So you're going to end up with that. You've developed the hip line, you've developed the side seam now, and now we need to go in and start developing our darts. Before we can truly develop our darts, these lines that we squared over, on the front it was down 1/2 inch, on the back it was down 1/4 of an inch. You're going to take your hip curve, you're going to blend from that line up to that 1 inch mark that we curved over to. You're going to do that on the front and you're going to do it on the back. If you hear laughing in the background, that's my nieces and nephews. Just like that. Okay. So now we are going to ignore the top line from now on. That very top line, we don't use that anymore. This is now our waist line. This curved line that we just formed, that is our waistline. So we're going to be taking all of our measurements along that now. So, along this line, what we're going to do is we're going to use our dart placement measurement. So if you go back to the front and to the back, this dimension right here on the front and on the back, from center front to that first dart leg, from center back to that first dart leg, that should be the same measurement that you use on the front and on the back. And the reason that that's important is because we want, when these get sewn together, we want this first dart to line up with the center front and the center back. So when these get sewn together here, just like that, this dart down here needs to line up with the dart on the bodice front. So this dart placement needs to be the same. I'm going to focus on the back for a little bit. On the back, I'm going to come up from the hip line 2 inches and just draw a horizontal line that's parallel to your hip line. Really only needs to extend as far as that first dart on the back. So this is going to be the level of the back dart. On the front, we're actually going to do the same, we're going to do a similar thing, but from our waistline, this new waistline that we measured down, so from this point here, let me zoom in on that so you can see it better. From this point here, not here, we don't care about that line anymore. From this point here, we're coming down 3 inches, and we're going to square over a line that's 3 inches down, square our line over from center front, just like that. That will be the level of the dart points for the front. So, once you have done that, we get to do some math. And I know we all love doing math. You need to measure the front and the back. They'll probably be about the same measurement, but measure those waistlines on your front pattern and on your back pattern and make a note of them someplace. So in my front, at half size is 4 1/4, so at full size that would be 8 1/2. And my back is actually 4 1/2. The front and the back might be very different. The front arc and the back arc often are, because the back will probably be bigger than the front because you've got a bum back there. So you have to take that into account. So what we're going to take now is our waist arc and find the difference between our waist arc and that number. So I've got my front waist arc, and I'm going to subtract that from the measurement that I just took off of my pattern. And that difference that I find needs to get taken up into 2 different darts. So let me say that again. I took the measurement off of my pattern of this waistline, and I made note of that. For me, it was 4 1/4. Then I went and I looked, or 8 1/2. Let's think of it in full size so you're used to those numbers. So this measurement was 8 1/2. Then I went to my measurement chart that I'd created, and I found my front waist arc. And I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch to that number. My front waist arc plus 1/4 of an inch. So for me, that's 7 1/4. And I'm going to divide those out. And whatever the distance is needs to be taken out in dart. So 8 minus 7 is 1 1/2 inches. So I need 1 1/4 inches to come out in darts on the front. So I will take 1 1/4, and since I'm doing 2 darts on the front, I need to take 1 1/4 and divide it by 2. So 1 1/4 divided by 2 is 5/8 of an inch. So from my first waist dart placement line, I'm going to go along the waist towards the side seam, that 5/8 of an inch. And make another line. I'm also going to find the middle point between those, because that's the center of my dart. To get the placement of the second dart, I'm going to measure between my side seam at the waist, right here, and the first dart leg that I come to here. So that space right there, I'm going to divide that by 2. And that is not quite the final placement for my dart. I have one more piece of math to do. So for me, that's 2 1/2, so half of that is 1 1/4. I'm going to take that number, so divide this in 2 and add 1/2 inch. So at full size, mine would be a 5-inch distance. This dimension from here to here would be 5 inches. I divide that in 2, that would give me 2 1/2, and then I add 1/2 inch. And that is the placement for the middle of your second dart. So this point right here that I've just found, I took this full measurement, divided it in 2, and added 1/2 inch, and then from the side seam I came towards the center front, that final dimension, and that equals the middle of my dart. I realize that that's potentially confusing. From the middle, we're going to square down to that 3-inch line that we've squared over from center front earlier. I'm going to square down. Draw in our dart legs. And we have the front with our 2 darts. Now we're going to do the same thing to the back. Now, with the back, my back waist arc, I will subtract from this line that I just took the measurement from. So for this line, mine was 4.5. I'm going to subtract my waist arc measurement, number 19, plus 1/4 inch of ease. To get how much needs to disappear into darts. So for me, I need 1 and 1/4 inch to disappear. You'll probably find that your darts will need to take out more on the back than on the front. That's normal. So take that number and divide it by 2, and half of that will go into one dart, and the other half will go into the other dart. So on, of course, so there's my first dart. And now, to find the location of the second dart, I'm going to measure between the second dart leg and my side seam. Divide that by 2. And add 1/2 inch. And that will give me the location of the center of my second dart. If your second dart kind of appears to be too big to you, it is alright for you to take a little bit from the outside dart that's closest to side seam and put a little bit of that into the middle dart. But now what we're going to do is we're going to square up from that line that we drew 2 inches up from the hip to the center of each of those darts. Fill in our dart legs on the center one. On the side, this dart is only going to be 4.5 inches long. So it's going to be a little bit shorter than the back dart. Once I've filled that in, I should be done with my skirts. All I need to do now is add my seam allowances and perfect my darts. Something to note, this is my side seam, which means I need to cut it apart. So let me just show you that on camera really quick so you don't get confused. You need to cut these 2 pieces apart. You need to cut them apart, just like that. So then come back in later and add your seam allowance. This might be a good time. Give yourself a full inch of seam allowance on the side seam and at center back. Give yourself a full inch of seam allowance there on both of those. And that's just for the fitting process. And I will now perfect the darts and everything off camera and then come back and show you everything all together. Alright, when you are done, you should have a front skirt, a back skirt, the sleeve that we created. Where did I put it? Here's my sleeve. The sleeve that we created. A bodice back from last week. And bodice front. Now, it is important for you to make sure you go through and make sure everything lines up perfectly. We've used measurements and everything. With the sleeve, I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to tape this part together just to show you how it comes together. The sleeve, go by your measurements to make sure that it works, which I did. When all of this is together, when the front is closed and the skirt fronts are closed, they should perfectly match. They should perfectly match the front, just like that. Those first two darts should perfectly line up, and then when everything else walks closed, your side seams should also match up. Yeah, just like that. So if it gets sewn together, it fits perfectly. Same thing on the back. If you don't want to actually tape it all and you just want to walk it all together by hand, that's totally fine. Or if you just want to measure the heck out of it to make sure that it works, that's fine too. But you have to make sure that your bodice top and your skirts all fit together, like they could get sewn together, just like that. Okay? You need those all to be able to work together because in a couple weeks we're going to be creating torso slopers, and we're going to use these to create the torso slopers. And in order for that to work, they need to all work and jive together really well. Plus, when you are done with this, you're going to sew it all together and come in and we're going to fit it on you and make sure that it all fits the way that it's supposed to. So, there you go. That is module number 8. So, I hope it all goes smoothly. If you have any questions, bring them to class, send me messages, whatever you want. But we need to make sure that this all fits perfect. Okay? Have a great week.